Welcome to the Market Mystics podcast. I'm Joshua.
I'm Kim. Let's dive in. Hey guys, welcome back.
Welcome back.
So I wanted to do a part 2 on our last conversation.
Except for it was a week ago, maybe. Depends when we post this.
Right, but our last episode. So this is part 2. Because we're talking about the ascending and descending of the mountain, laying things down as you go up the mountain and picking them up as you come back down. Mm-hmm. Also, the concept of simply trading things in, and as well as giving up on things, right? Laying things down just because they're too hard. But what I wanted to expound upon, and I'm afraid this might wind up being only a 2-minute conversation, but where I wanted to go next with this is talking about that linear up and down the mountain versus, is there any point in which we operate in a multidimensional kind of way when we are both at the top of the mountain, ascending, descending, and operating at the bottom all at the same time? And have you ever seen it happen? Have you ever experienced it? All of the things.
I would love if you started and just give a little bit of something, and then we'll
Okay, so this is where I'm going with this, and I could be way off base. I can admit that. That happens sometimes. But I think sometimes in our relationship and as we're growing with the Lord, and especially if you've ever been someone who seeks out oneness, there are times when you're operating fully in that oneness while still operating fully in the earth. And I mean, there are arguments to be had in all different ways. Like you'd say, well, the Lord actually resides within you, and so he's always with you. The kingdom of heaven is actually always with you, and there is no separation. It's a paradigm in which we produce on our own. Like there's a separation. But also, I think there have been times when it feels like, yes, operating in that complete wholeness, like that oneness with him, which would also include oneness with everyone else, while still outworking here in that individualized state. Right? And sometimes the up and down, the oneness and the outworking can all be happening at the same time. But I want to know your opinion on this. I feel like we've touched on this months ago in a private conversation. This is why I say it could be only a 2-minute conversation, because Josh could just shoot me down like that. But I want to hear your point of view on that. Like, what do you think?
I think to some extent, the first thing that comes to my mind is it is happening at the same time, because except for a very few of us, our physical bodies are always here on the earth. There are stories and biblical examples of people who got to take their physical body to heaven or to another place. And so that, I think that would be I think that's actually the rarer example. I think more often than not, we are encouraged to live a life where we are constantly in that, living in both places. There's, um, but also like I think I also understand your, like, another part of the question of being like, mm, are you sitting in your closet meditating while you're going up and down and then coming out and doing things? Or are you in a business meeting in a boardroom surrounded by people while in that process? Um, and yeah, um, I think it, more often than not starts in private, um, and then moves to being where you, I think some of it is like, okay, you made the comment like Jesus lives or God lives within us. And so it's just always there. And it's our paradigm that doesn't see it and doesn't believe it. I believe that's true. And so I think part of what you're doing in the private moment is you're shifting your paradigm, you're shifting your consciousness to where you're aware that that's happening already within you. And the more that shifts and the more that adjusts, the more that that translates to you being able to just walk that way every day. But that's sort of the example of our older brother, like Yeshua, of constantly being aware of his oneness while constantly being aware of being on earth with the people around him. And so I do think that that's possible, and I do think that's probably optimal. Um, but I think that that journey starts as a journey of being in private and doing that on your own. And sometimes, um, uh, sometimes it looks like I think, yeah, use this example of Jesus, like where I think he walked like that all the time, but there's also many notes of him stepping away to be alone to pray, stepping away to be alone, like. And so I don't know, uh I think sometimes the aloneness or the privateness of that journey is like a supercharger, because there's no distractions. You're not trying to be in both places. You can just focus in being in one.
Mhm.
But I think as you build that tank, as you build that like reservoir of that relationship, then it translates into just every moment of your life.
Yeah, I think that's kind of what I was getting at. I think of, um, I do think of that. And I thought of that too when Jesus would go to the mountain to get away and
Mm-hmm.
focus, right? And, but I think it has so much to do with, even if the kingdom is within you, right? If the Father lives within you, if Jesus lives within you, if you hold all that already within you, where is the focus? And I think
Mm-hmm.
sometimes in the process of learning, in the process of mm, getting acclimated to the way that the kingdom works, I would say, or the way
Mm-hmm.
that the Father works, or whatever, sometimes you really have to see it in this three-dimensional, this linear way, before you can hold it another way and hold all the things all at once. Um, I had this experience. It was early on when I was engaging, and I was just asking questions. Like, I am like the most curious person. This is why podcasting kind of fits for me, is because I like to ask questions. So I'm like asking Yeshua one day. And I'm like, okay, I have a question. Here's my question. Is the earth round or flat? Because everyone likes to argue about it, right? And there's all the conspiracy theories, and people like really like to talk about it if they really like to talk about it. And he said, that's not for you to know. And I was like, okay. Like, what do you say when Jesus tells you I'm not answering you, right? But then a couple years later, I was engaging and in something different where I had to look at the earth like from a higher perspective. And he came back to me and he said, Kim, you're asking the wrong question. You're asking if it's round or flat, but it's none of those. It's multidimensional. And I think it was a lesson to me in like how to look at things, and how even at the time that I asked, I was asking from a place where I couldn't hold that multidimensional thing. And he couldn't tell me that then because I wouldn't have been able to handle it. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? And I think that as we go on, and we may need to see these things linearly, and I still do. Like, it's not like I'm like, oh, I can live within all the multiple dimensions and be comfortable all the time. I can't. But there are some times that I can, and
Mhm.
like more than I used to, you know? But I think sometimes we really need that imagery, and we need to be able to function in that linear way of the like going up the mountain, one path, reaching oneness, coming down the mountain, one path, operating in the earth, and having that real up and down, because it's what we know and how we can best start to understand this process. But then I think sometimes there are times when we start maturing a little and we can hold it a bit longer. Kind of like in the last episode, I was talking about power lifters, right?
Mhm.
Like they will like max themselves out and they hold this thing, but then they have to drop it and they have to rest for a day or two before they can do it again because they've completely reached failure, right? And I'm not saying go to a place of failure, but I'm saying sometimes we're not able to hold things for a long time. But in practicing to hold them, even if it is, I'm only multidimensional for 2 seconds a day, it builds that muscle and it gets you more used to it. And your body gets used to it, and your soul gets used to it, and your spirit gets used to it so that you can start holding more and more. Um, and I guess that's kind of what I'm getting at with this whole proposition of this topic is that. And I don't know that I think anyone gets to a place where they've arrived. Maybe they have. Have you ever? Okay, we've read the book, The Masters of the Life and Teaching of the Masters of the Far East. And there are examples of people in that I think maybe have mastered that,
Mhm.
of the living multidimensionally,
Mhm.
where the things that we see in this earth as being linear, space, time, and more, those principles just don't apply to them anymore because they function somewhere else. But they
Mhm.
also function fully in the earth, um, but within a different paradigm. And I guess, is that where we're going?
Mhm. I do think, yes, it's where we're going, but I also think, mm, I don't think it's ever to the exclusion of your own private time. And
Yeah,
I think that's like where I sit with it is like, yes, I think that ultimately that is uh, maybe the highest form of being human, of being in a physical body. That's probably the highest form. But I don't, uh, but even that, I think it's an extension of the quiet one on one moments
sure.
rather than being the other way around.
I don't disagree at all, but I also have to ask, can they not live simultaneously? Because of kind of what was touched on earlier, like the no separation, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
we kind of create that paradigm that there's a separation. But if there is indeed no separation and you are able to like live in that space of no separation, then is the personal time not 100% of the time while the working in the earth is also 100% of the time? You know what I mean? Does that make sense?
And
Even that question?
I know what you mean. Your question makes sense to me. Uh, I think I lack examples of that being possible. And so it makes me wonder, is it possible? But also there's things that happen all the time that people have said were impossible. And until someone does it, like we all think it's impossible.
Sure.
And then someone does it and all of a sudden it opens up something neurologically where everyone's like, oh, okay, yeah, that's possible. I can do it. So I don't know. Where I sit with it right now is it sort of seems like both are necessary. Um, but maybe you get to that point. Also, I think part of my answer stems from I don't want to just be around people all the time.
I had wondered that. I thought I did have one little thought to myself. I thought this is such an introverted
Yeah.
answer.
Yeah. Like I think that that probably plays a role in my answer is because part of me is just like I don't want to be out in the community 24/7. I want
Sure.
to be in and out and in and out. Like that's I think being in the community is super important.
Mm.
I just like, yeah, me personally, I'm like, I don't just want to live in that. Like that doesn't sound fun to me.
That's so funny. I was also thinking about the topic of focus that you had brought up, and even with Jesus operating this way in the earth, and how sometimes he would have to go and retreat, right? And get
Mhm.
alone with the Father. But it makes me wonder because there were so many things that he did that kind of allude to him doing them alongside the Father. Like, I only do what I see my Father doing, right?
Sure.
Which was a present tense kind of statement, at least in the English. And this is off the cuff, so I haven't looked into it in the Hebrew. Like, just bear with me on that. But some of those things, like he is operating both, like in the oneness, only stepping as the Father's stepping. You know what I mean? Without the separation, and among people to minister to them. And when people are coming against him, he's living more. Like there's some of these things that are exemplified of him really operating in that oneness. But then there are also those times when he had to retreat. And it makes me wonder about the subject of focus. And like, was it when he got to a point when no longer could he focus on both and hold both?
Mm.
Then he had to go and get alone. You know what I mean? I think about just normal life, and we have these cell phones, right, that we carry around and can take our focus so easily. Have you ever like not had your cell phone and then you feel a phantom buzz and it takes your focus even though you don't actually have your phone?
Yeah.
And it just shifts. Like you could be operating really well in a flow with whatever it is you're doing and feel this, and it immediately steals your focus. But I think there are also times that we can hold the phone, which is a funny way to say that, but hold the device in your hand and even have it on or be listening to music or doing something and still have the ability to operate within the paradigm you're supposed to be operating as well.
Mhm.
So sometimes I don't know. I just wonder if we can hold both and if we can exercise that muscle to be able to. I'm looking at it like this in my mind. Like here's the mountain and you like ascend up one side and you descend down the other side. And the bottom of the mountain is where you're operating in the earth, and top of the mountain is where you're at oneness, right?
Mm.
So can we take this and instead of it just be a triangle, can we flip it like this and have them all work at the same time? Do you know what I mean? Like it's flipping
Yeah.
on its side and making it all as one. And I don't actually expect to have answers out of this. These are things that I contemplate. And I wonder what is the ideal and what is
Mm,
possible. And Jesus even said, we'll do all of the things that he's done and greater. And if he had to step away to refocus, is there a way or a time in which we won't have to step away to refocus?
mm.
Is that one of the greater things that he was talking about?
Yeah, so I had this thought while you were sharing that. And I've had this thought a couple times about different things, but one of the I don't know if limitations is the right word. One of the aspects of life that Jesus walked in was there was no one else operating at his level while he was on the earth that we're aware of.
Mhm.
He was teaching people, he was showing people this is how you can live life. I've often wondered, is part of the greater things that we'll do possible because there's an invitation for communities of people to function in that level. And so did he have to step away because he was carrying the whole load of everyone around him? And is part of that like ability to share that weight take away the need to have as many like respite times?
Yeah.
I don't know. I think that that's a I at least think to some degree I can't see a way that it doesn't make it easier if someone is helping you carry the load.
Yeah. Yeah. I completely agree.
Mm,
And I even think that some of these things that we're talking about, it's an interesting thing because it's helping to carry the load. So it's like a division of the load bearing.
mhm,
But I also think that when multiple people are operating this way, it's a multiplication of um, the effectiveness, I guess, or the impact of how you're operating. And so, is it as draining when you're doing it with other people? You know what I mean? So, when something is needing to take that focus and pull, there's more of the oneness to pull from than could actually distract you. Does that make any sense?
yeah,
Like,
I
what percentage
do.
of oneness do you need to be able to hold on to, like, to maintain oneness and not
Mm,
completely step out of it, I suppose,
yeah.
or be in that separated space again? This is all like out there. I know that this is also theoretical, but this is honestly how I grow. It is.
Yeah. No, I think it's a great question, and I think that it's like that's definitely it's something to like hold on to. Like what would it be like to function? I mean, first of all, what's it like to function in wholeness within yourself? To be optimally living your ideal life or God's ideal life for you yourself. And then what would that look like inside of a community that was also doing that? And obviously, that's like we're talking about like utopian things, but I believe that that's a possibility of where we could be, where we could head. And it doesn't necessarily mean every person on the earth is functioning like that, but even how much difference of would it have made if like would it make for you if you had two or three or four people functioning like that around you? Like I just think that the shared resources of that power would be incredible.
I think you're right. And I think the effort and relationship sometimes gets, this is sad to say, reduced a little bit, but when you're operating in that oneness and there's no separation, and I think that intents don't have to be brought into question, and you're all tapped into the same source and operating in that, and so things tend to flow more easily, right? Like just before this we started recording, we had taken a break in between recording, and Josh sent me this link for a YouTube link, and he said, oh, look at the title of this. Well, we got back on the call and we were talking about something, and then I was like, oh my gosh, that's really funny. And I was like, oh, I didn't tell him what that was. Oh, I'm referring to the YouTube link. He's like, I know. Why? Because we're just kind of tuned into that. I think we've operated enough together. And even in the space of seeking oneness, even just individually seeking that oneness with the Father, that then immediately translates into oneness with one another.
Yeah.
So the effort is less, but the effect is greater. Yeah. Interesting. Okay.
I think that's great. There's something about this, like, I mean, even the Bible talks about like where 2 or 3 are gathered in his name. Like, there's the whole Bible is about family and community and like partnership. And there's just something in me that's like, I guess crying out, longing to see what that looks like inside of a mature community. Like, what does it look like for a mature community to really walk this way? What would not even just the earth, what would just your surrounding area look like if that was possible?
Right. Good stuff. Okay. I'd love some feedback on this.
Yeah.
Like, these are legitimate questions. And seeking, and honestly, I think the more perspective we can hear on this, the more we can take it back and really mull it over with the Father and figure out kind of what his intent is with this. I don't know. I just really value that feedback. I value that connection. Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks for joining, guys. We'll see you next time.
See you. Thank you for sticking around. Listen for new episodes every Monday and Thursday. Find us on all social media platforms by searching for Market Mystics. Don't forget to follow and subscribe. Visit upperroomcd.com, where you can find more information about the hosts, projects, and guests. Go deeper by booking a coaching appointment focused on redefining identity and wealth in your life. See you next time.